Hello, welcome to the podcast There Is No Spoon. There is a view, shared by both existential and Jungian psychologists, that the second half of life is about coming to terms with mortality and consciously integrating it into one's existence. This is generally a complex and, more importantly, taboo subject. In everyday conversation, people tend to avoid such topics. Even though reality constantly reminds us that humans are mortal, it's not so easy to indeed apply that fact to ourselves. The Russian writer Leo Tolstoy expressed this idea in his novella The Death of Ivan Ilyich through his protagonist's realization. In the depths of his soul, Ivan Ilyich knew that he was dying. But not only was he not accustomed to it, he simply did not. He could not possibly understand it. The example of a syllogism he had studied in Kiesewetta's logic, Caius is a man, men are mortal, therefore Caius is mortal, had seemed to him all his life to be correct only in relation to Caius, but by no means to himself. For the man Caius, man in general, it was perfectly correct. But he was not Caius, and not man in general. He had always been quite separate from all other beings. This idea is echoed in the work of Irvin Yalom, for whom the existential fear of death was a central theme. He pointed out that people tend to believe in their own exceptionalism. In a way, this belief originates in childhood. Philippe Ariès, a French historian, described in his seminal work, Western Attitudes Toward Death, how children's perception of death changes over time. One common coping mechanism is to acknowledge death, but only as something that happens to others. When a child sees an elderly relative die, they naturally think that death is for old people, not them. The problem is basically put on the back burner, and often not dealt with at all until midlife, when we enter the second half of our lives. Fear of death is one of the most widespread and deeply ingrained human fears. One of the most challenging aspects of studying this phenomenon is the sheer variety of defense mechanisms people develop. In his book, Existential Psychotherapy, Yalom identifies dozens of ways people attempt to manage their fear of death. One common response to the fear of death is the pursuit of immortality, both literal and symbolic. A person struggling with this fear may decide to start a family, seeing their children as a way to extend their existence beyond their own lifetime. Others seek solace in the belief that the soul is eternal. Yet no matter the approach, these strategies do not eliminate the underlying fear. They merely push it into deeper layers of the psyche. The risks of chasing immortality have been explored in many myths and stories. A well-known example is the myth of Eos and Tithonus. To clarify, this is not the giant Tithonus who fought Zeus, but the mortal lover of the goddess Eos. The story goes like this. Eos, the goddess of dawn, had a habit of falling in love with mortal men. She fell in love with a handsome young man named Tithonus. Fearing that he would eventually grow old and die like her past lovers, she went to Zeus and asked him to grant Tithonus immortality. Zeus granted her request. But there was a catch. Eos soon realized she had made a crucial mistake. She had asked for immortality, but forgotten to request eternal youth. As the years passed, Tithonus aged and withered, eventually becoming so frail and helpless that Eos locked him away, unable to bear watching his decline. The lesson? Immortality alone does not solve the problem of mortality. And yet, humanity continues to chase it. A modern example of this theme appears in Harry Potter, where Voldemort, terrified of death, goes to extreme lengths to achieve immortality. He is willing to split his own soul and commit murder, even the murder of a child, to escape his fate. But as we all know from J.K. Rowling's books, his desperate pursuit of immortality only leads to his downfall. Of course, the problem is not simply the desire to avoid aging, as in the myth of Eos and Tithonus. The issue runs deeper. As James Hollis writes, if we were immortal, nothing would have any meaning or value. But we are not immortal, and so every choice we make matters. It is in making choices that we become human and find meaning in our lives. James Hollis, The Middle Passage. This is a powerful insight. Humans live by meaning, any meaning. Without it, there is no motivation, no drive to act. This leads to an important conclusion. In many ways, it is precisely our mortality that gives weight and significance to our choices and actions. One of the key tasks of midlife transition is learning to live without the paralyzing fear of death. Existentialists make an important distinction between two types of freedom: freedom from and freedom to. The second type is far more meaningful. If we free ourselves from fear, what will we do with that freedom? Beyond the obvious answer that it allows us to take paths we previously avoided, there is a deeper one. It enables a richer, more meaningful life. Liberated from the fear of death, a person begins to truly appreciate life as it is. Each decision carries more weight, and they can craft a more authentic and fulfilling story for themselves. This closely aligns with existential ideas of authenticity and Jung's concept of individuation, doesn't it? What to do with all this? First, it's important to acknowledge that there are no universal answers to such deep existential questions. The best response may simply be, seek your own answer. James Hollis touches on this idea. According to the legend of the Grail, recorded centuries ago, it is a shameful thing to walk the path laid by others. Life is unique for each person. Perhaps it is not even about finding a final answer, but rather about engaging in the search itself. This is, in fact, one of the key differences between the first and second halves of life. In the first, we learn to follow rules, norms, and traditions. In the second, we have the opportunity to define who we truly are. Another way to approach this is through awareness. Hollis insightfully notes, people resist seeing life as a dynamic process. They want to believe it is stable and unchanging. But life is a continuous cycle of endings and new beginnings. Many avoid embracing this reality, preferring instead to stay in the familiar for as long as possible. Until we accept both the beginning and the end as natural parts of life, we are not truly living. There is a useful exercise from existential psychology that helps increase awareness in the context of actions and desires. It is directly related to the theme of this episode. The exercise is as follows. Imagine that you have only 1 year left to live. What would you do during this year? Write these actions down on a piece of paper. Then repeat the exercise, but shorten the period to 1 month. What would you do then? What if it were 1 week? What if it were just 1 day? Now ask yourself, are you doing these things now? And if not, why? Why are you postponing what you truly want? To sum up this episode, I want to note that, unfortunately, I don't have any clear answers or step-by-step instructions when it comes to these topics. All that remains is to explore myths, metaphors, and the life stories of those who have crossed the midlife threshold. Most likely, the absence of a clear algorithm is a defining feature of existential questions. We must each find our own, personal answer to them. To conclude, here is a fitting quote from Jung. Life is a short episode between two great mysteries, which in reality are one and the same. This was the podcast, There Is No Spoon. Until next time.